When we talk about education, we usually get caught up in data and benchmarks and test scores. But today, we're going to look at it differently. We're going to dive into a story, a really personal one, that gets to the heart of how we actually learn. And it reveals a fundamental truth. Education isn't just a process, it's architecture.
So picture this. A mother, who happens to be a teacher, sits down with her son. She opens his English textbook and asks him to read the first line. A simple, everyday request, right? But his response was silence. He couldn't. Not that he wouldn't or was being lazy, he just could not read the words in front of him.
In that one moment, you can just imagine, all her professional training just vanished. She wasn't a teacher anymore, she was a mom facing this devastating realization. And it raises this huge question, one that gets right to the core of this story. How does something so important, so fundamental, get missed, especially in the home of an educator? That moment in the living room, well, it was more than just a wake-up call. It was the beginning of a complete teardown and reconstruction of her son's entire education.
Now, let's be clear, this wasn't a story of neglect. Not at all. It was the reality that so many of us know all too well. The constant juggle of a demanding job and family life. And in that whirlwind, a gap had formed in her son Kaushik's most basic learning. It was completely unintentional, but it was very, very real.
So, that very same evening marked a turning point. The mom immediately switched into teacher mode, ready to fix the problem. But what she ran into was a completely different kind of barrier, one she never saw coming.
Every time she tried to teach him, she was met with this wall. He wasn't just having trouble with the reading, he was completely disengaged, emotionally shut down. The two roles, mother and teacher, were clashing, and instead of helping, it was just creating more friction.
And this right here, this was the heart of the problem. For her son, every instruction just felt like criticism. Every single correction felt like a personal attack, like he was failing her. That emotional dynamic was the real roadblock, and it was stopping any kind of learning dead in its tracks. So she realized, okay, just pushing harder isn't going to work. She needed a totally new plan, a different blueprint for learning that would change the entire dynamic. And her strategy was, honestly, brilliant. She invited one of her son's classmates, a girl who also needed some extra help, and offered her free lessons. The only condition for her own son, Kaushik, just sit with them. That was it. No pressure, just be in the room. This simple three-step plan changed everything. First, bringing in a friend immediately lowered the emotional stakes. Second, by taking away that direct pressure to perform, she gave him the space to just observe. And maybe most importantly, she didn't try to pick up where he left off. She went all the way back to the very beginning. And that's what this next phase was all about. This wasn't a quick fix. It was a slow, methodical process. It was about rebuilding his literacy from the absolute ground up, one brick at a time.
She dove into real foundational learning. We're talking about the absolute essentials here. The sounds that letters make, how to blend those sounds into words, how to string words together into a basic sentence. No shortcuts, just a disciplined, patient return to the core mechanics of how to read.
Now you have to understand, the breakthrough wasn't some single, magical aha moment. It was a slow, gradual journey. His initial resistance eventually softened into just quietly participating, and then that passive participation turned into active engagement, which finally blossomed into real confidence. It happened step by step. So what was the result of all this? By the time he got to grade 10, Kaushik scored an 80% on his board exams. But look, that number, it's so much more than just a grade. It's a symbol of recovery, of resilience. It's proof that a foundation, even a broken one, can be rebuilt stronger than before. And this whole journey reveals a really powerful truth, and the metaphor is perfect. You simply can't build a strong building on a weak foundation. Education is exactly the same. It has to be built systematically, layer by careful layer. So what can we all take away from this? What are the universal lessons from this one family story that parents, that educators, that entire school systems can use to build stronger foundations for every single learner? Well, here are 5 big ones. First, foundational gaps are often hiding in plain sight. Second, the emotional environment is everything when it comes to academic growth. Third, learning alongside a peer can break down defensive walls that authority can't. Fourth, and this is so important, going back to basics isn't a step backward, it's reinforcement.
And finally, real learning is built over time. You just can't rush it.
And this all brings us back to that central idea of architecture. When we get obsessed with speed, with just pushing kids through the curriculum to the next grade, we risk creating incredibly fragile structures. We end up with learners who advance in grade level, sure, but not in actual competence. We're building taller, but we're not building stronger. Which leaves us with a pretty critical question to ask ourselves. In our schools, in our own homes, and in the policies we create, what are we really prioritizing? Are we building for speed, or are we building for strength?